Hey everyone, what up? Matt Kaiser here, and welcome to a very special retrospective. Thanks to the wonderful people at Patreon, especially George D, that gave me the opportunity to make this video. Now, the Transformers brand has been a popular icon since the 80s, starting out as a toy brand with robots transforming to vehicles, and then became a huge phenomenon with the original Generation 1 cartoon depicting the heroic Autobots and the evil Decepticons taking the world from the home planet of Cybertron all the way back down to Earth. Among that, the franchise has had many shows with multiple reinventions of the formula among comics and of course the movies, albeit with varying levels of quality.
I am directly below the enemy scrotum.
However, when it comes to the video games, they tend to either fall into either average or really bad, with nothing more to be just a cheap cash grab that can either be frustrating or just downright unplayable. Though, all of that changed in 2010, when Transformers War for Cybertron was released, and it showed that a really good Transformers game could be possible, among also delivering on what, at the time, many fans have wanted, an actual look into the Great War that happened on Cybertron. And at the time of this video, the game will turn around 15 years old, which, yeah. Are you feeling old yet? Cause I sure am. With that, why not we look back on how this great game came to be, and how it holds up now. But before we begin, if you like what you're seeing here, then by all means, like the video, click the subscribe button if you're new, and hit the notification icon if you want more reviews and retrospectives from yours truly. With that said, let's get back to the video. And without further ado, let's roll out.
What?
Louder.
Transform and roll out! Now, Transformers War for Cybertron was being made using Unreal Engine 3 and developed by High Moon Studios, with the physics for that game being handled with the Havoc physics library. A demo of the game released on June 10, 2010, which allowed for players to play through various multiplayer matches using two of the game's character classes. They designed the AI to be more friendly, so much that when a player progresses through the story, any accompanying characters will help the player, but still require the player to advance through the game. With game director Matt says, and I quote, "The buddies don't advance the story for you, they get to the point to kind of show you where to go, but then they'll take up defensive positions and wait for you to progress the story. They're not finishing objectives for you, but they like to stay nearby." This game was being published by Activision, who worked closely with Hasbro to create the design and story for the game. Tiega also said that, "I want to make the game I've been waiting 25 years to play." The studio brought the concept and idea to Hasbro for approval, which began with a sketch of Bumblebee. High Moon also presented the idea of the setting for the game to be entirely on Cybertron during the Transformers Civil War between both the Autobots and Decepticons. Aaron Archer, senior design director for Hasbro, stated of the Cybertron-based setting and said, "That's a really cool place, and the early days of that civil war between the Autobots and Decepticons was a story that really hadn't been fleshed out in any format." Each of the characters was redesigned for the game, taking cues from previous iterations from Transformers lore. The vehicle modes for car-based characters initially consisted of wheels. However, the developers found that it crippled the gameplay by removing the player's ability to strafe while in vehicle mode. The world of Cybertron was designed in such a way that the Transformers would have a proper scale in their homeworld. Matt Krystek, lead designer at High Moon, stated that since the game is not tied to a movie, they were able to tell their own story. He also cited that the G1 universe as the inspiration for the game. Jim Daly, lead concept artist at High Moon, also cited that the G1 universe was the main design inspiration for Cybertron itself, and also stating that there were elements from Disney's Tron, Blade Runner, and the Aliens franchise. John Moscone, senior account manager for Hasbro's public relations team, further clarified that War for Cybertron is in the same continuity as the Transformers Prime animated series and Transformers Exodus novel, among also the likes of Robots in Disguise 2015 and Rescue Bots, which of course formed the continuity known as the Aligned Continuity. Which certainly was a decision, alright? Especially when it comes to narrative cohesion. However, Transformers War for Cybertron released on June 2010 for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC. The game will be well received by both fans and critics, and it sold decently. It would also get lower console variants in the form of Transformers Cybertron Adventures on the Nintendo Wii by Next Level Games, which was more of an on-rail shooter, and 2 DS versions, being both a Decepticon and Autobot version that was made by Vicarious Visions. This game, however, had a lot of cut content, which includes multiple unused weapons in this game, with the most notable one that was only appeared in a cutscene, that being the ceremonial staff. There were other also things like that appeared in either cutscenes and trailers, or just was completely cut entirely. Also, we did have an unused cutscene in the files that shows Starscream rambling something with no audio present. The file name likely suggests that it would have been the first Decepticon chapter of the game. In the game's localization file, there are listings for 8 more DLC maps. It's completely unknown of what they are for escalation or multiplayer, or both, but they have names such as Surge, Turmoil, Impact, Void, Pressure, Beacon, Badlands, Desolation, Exodus, Abotanium, Fusion, Fragment, and Citadel. And also, we did have an unused co-op split-screen mode in the game's files, which of course never made it to the full Realtel version of the game. It was also possible that this would have involved up to 3 controllers using the campaign level at the same time, probably for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 versions of the game. Now, with that history archive over, let's dive in straight into the real transformation cog of this video. So our story falls on Cybertron, in the midst of the ongoing war between factions, where the evil Decepticons, led by Megatron, obtains a powerful, albeit dangerous energy source called Dark Energon, using its power to turn the tide against the Autobots, and corrupt all of Cybertron to his will. And then you have Optimus, before he became a Prime, where he has now the opportunity to rise to a new occasion and has to help lead the Autobots to repel against this new threat. And that is the overall story. The narrative overall is pretty simple, straight to the point, and overall, both well written and engaging, with it showing on how grim this war really is, focusing on the Decepticons at first and their strive to obtain this dark power, and then later focusing on the Autobots' desperate struggle to survive. The story itself isn't afraid to even show things like death or torture, and it further emphasizes on how insane and intimidating Megatron is, especially in his ideals. The story itself also has some really compelling and interesting moments here, like Starscream initially working for the Autobots before he joined the Decepticons, and the rise of Optimus becoming a Prime. But even with the dark tone, there's good amount of levity and banter to help make the tone feel balanced, and more appropriate with things like Generation 1, Beast Wars, and Transformers Prime, on how those shows handle their tone, opposed to say Beast Machines or even Netflix's War for Cybertron trilogy, where those shows steep into the dark themes way too much. In fact, it's mainly thanks to the characters here, each of them being portrayed well with having lots of good dialogue and writing that feels appropriate to their character, on top of just some really stellar voice acting. Every voice actor in this is in top form here, with having the legendary veteran and now Lifetime Emmy Award winner Peter Cullen reprising his role as Optimus Prime since his days of G1, as well as him voicing in both the Prime cartoon and the live-action movies. And he still delivers a superb performance. And despite being a more mature story here, his portrayal leans more onto what he will become in Transformers Prime and even aspects of Generation 1. As a leader, he believes in the freedom of all sentient beings, instead of say the murderous psychopath, where he's become more infamous in the Michael Bay movies here.
Don't worry, we'll get those guns online. Temporary command? Not now, Ratchet. Jetfire needs those guns online. I'll kill you! Stay back! Don't shoot! Don't shoot!
And then you have other amazing voice actors here, like Fred Taylor Shaw, giving an overall amazing performance as both Megatron and Ratchet. And while I do think it would have been cool to have Frank Welker reprise his role as Megatron, just like Peter did in this one, as he would so in both Transformers Prime and even Transformers 4 and 5, Fred here still gives an overall menacing and great performance, and it really describes on how twisted and fierce this warmonger is, and how both sides do fear him in a sense. You also have other great VAs here, like Johnny Young Bosch as Bumblebee, Sam Riegel as Starscream, Troy Baker as both Zeta Prime and Jetfire, and Liam O'Brien as Air Raid.
Alert! Autobots detected. Destroy them. Miners!
The overall narrative for this game is compelling, and while trying to connect it to both Transformers Prime and other media within the Align continuity, gives more of a processor ache than intended. On its own, War for Cybertron's story is still great. Now we get on to the visuals, and this is a part where I'm fairly mixed upon. Now, on the one hand, it's really cool to see Cybertron detailed heavily here, seeing both the Autobot and Decepticon cities here fully realized in an overall mechanical world, with various levels here showing moving machinery and parts that feel like, well, a machine, given the illusion that you are in the world of the Transformers. However, on the other hand, there's also the color filter, and this was at a time where lots of 7th generation games were really obsessed with these color filters, and I don't think nowadays it holds up quite well as it did back in 2010, with it showing nothing more than just various amounts of grey and black in the shades. Now, I get what they're going for here, to really depict on how dark and grim this world would really feel, with the only exception being the purple hues at Kaon and the sunset hues at Icon. Though it does help that at least the characters themselves pop out visually, and design wise, everyone looks great here, mixing both aspects of the Generation 1 designs with its own flavor to make these designs overall stand out from other incarnations. I even love the detail here of the highlights glowing within their bodies and how some of their parts will move interchangeably. The designs here are absolutely S tier. Now, as for performance, especially running on my PC, it sadly does cap at 30 FPS, which is a bit of a shame, but at least on my side, it was mostly consistent. Though, however, the amazing FMVs here do run at a good 60 FPS. Then we move on to the gameplay. So Transformers War for Cybertron is a third-person shooter, and if you played any of those games like say Gears of War, you'll be familiar with the gameplay. Being able to shoot, use a trigger to zoom and aim, switch between two weapons, grab and throw grenades, and have one melee attack. The usual stuff. But what obviously sets this apart from other shooters is being able to transform in your ult mode, and in itself having an additional weapon, as well as being able to move within the battlefield, as among also switching both between vehicle mode and robot mode is fairly seamless, and adds a whole new flavor of combat in the mix. You also have character perks, where each character will provide various abilities to perform, like Starscream performing a shockwave, Ironhide spinning his axe to hit enemies, or even things like Soundwave deploying a drone, though these aspects get recharged by collecting energon shards from fallen enemies. Each character will have their own class and weapon. There are also things like having an energon overshield, much like the one you will see in, like, say, the Halo series, as well as finding turrets to mount on, some of which would have even infinite ammo, and detaching them becoming a machine gun, at the cost of being too heavy and unable to switch between your weapon or even transform without detaching it. The overall gameplay in this is really smooth, among also being able to double jump, which makes some really good platforming in the mix, and there are even some sections where you're able to transform into your vehicle modes, and the controls here are really great here. The various amounts of weapons you do have on offer play well, and among pack a nice punch and nice variety here. That being said, there are some caveats, one of which is that the party AI can be hit and miss at times, as occasionally they can be effective on killing enemies, but sometimes they are dumb and they shoot randomly at objects like they got Stormtrooper aim. Another is that the enemy design does get a bit repetitive, as you'll see the various amounts of enemy types, but within different skins as either Autobots or Decepticons. But the only standout that the Decepticons have are being these war machines as mini-bosses and spiders? Yeah, the most terrifying and dangerous enemy in all Cybertron is arachnids. And then we have the bosses, and they're okay, they're fine for what they are. The only ones interesting I found was the fight against Soundwave and the final fight against Tripticon. And lastly, the Decepticon campaign's roster feels oddly limited compared to the Autobots, as the last 3 missions of Decepticons have you just play as Megatron, Soundwave, and Breakdown. And while I do get that on like a story perspective, the Autobots have much more variety, even if most of them boils down to having either Optimus or Bumblebee. But even then, you at least have one new character to add to your crew that adds a little bit more flavor in the mix. Oh, and that one mission where you had to protect Ratchet from being shot at fucking sucks. It's terrible. But all in all, the gameplay in Transformers War for Cybertron is awesome. When it comes to the music, War for Cybertron is absolutely great here, with delivering both an epic, technological, and impactful score that really suits the tone and style of this game. Being done by Tyler Bates, who's renowned for working on lots of compositions for movies such as the John Wick series, as well as the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Bates brings an overall flair with adding lots of guitars, drums, and other orchestral instruments, and overall, each of it suits the game very well, especially with the right moment, making it feel like you're on the verge of war between 2 giant robots going toe to toe with each other. And as such, here's a quick preview. Now we get on to the content. So the game provided a lot on its initial release, with the most notable addition being online co-op in both the campaign and multiplayer, with the former having the option to play as any of the other party members and joining a friend playing through the story, and for the latter, where War introduced Escalation, which is a horde mode where you and other players have to survive through endless hordes of foes, and doing so, you are able to unlock new characters to play in multiplayer mode, which involves even customizing your own transformer, albeit it was very basic, and you can perform in battles like Deathmatch,
Team Deathmatch!
Countdown to Extinction, and Conquest. However, sadly, around 2020, the game's online servers shut down, though thankfully, some dedicated Transformers fans have been able to restore the servers that you can play on either PlayStation 3 or PC, thanks to their mod on Discord, which I'll leave a link in the description down below. However, without that, the campaign itself is roughly 8 hours, with only 10 chapters in total, which on today's games may not sound like a whole much, but for what it is, especially for a Transformers game, it's fairly solid. Overall, as mentioned before, Transformers War for Cybertron proved to be a success, with it providing an epic story and giving what Transformers fans wanted at the time. Even if the novelty has worn off a bit thanks to the likes of other media like Netflix's War for Cybertron trilogy, as recently the opening scene in both Bumblebee and the entirety of Transformers 1. But still, this was a unique twist on the formula, and it paved the way of having an amazing sequel 2 years later with Transformers Fall of Cybertron, among also establishing its own continuity with the aligned continuity. I would love to review that game someday even. But even so, how does War for Cybertron hold up? Well, for the most part, really well. Really even this game, especially even now after watching and experiencing various amounts of Transformers media, this game really was a cut above the rest in terms of Transformers games. No other Transformers game beforehand could portray an epic story, let alone have this amazing fun gameplay. In many ways, this is what could have been a potentially good movie here. Now sure, there are some things that really date this game a bit, like the visuals and some archaic elements here and there, but all in all, War for Cybertron proved to be a fantastic product, and shows that Transformers games can actually be good. However, it's really sad that around 2020, this game was delisted off from all digital storefronts, and trying to get a physical copy now at a good price is almost next to impossible. There have been rumblings about this game, as well as Fall of Cybertron supposedly being released by Activision, since Microsoft did acquire them, and reports do indicate that the source code for these games are still alive, and Hasbro recently had a brand new Gamer Edition toy line based on this game and Fall of Cybertron. But who's to say really? Until then, all we can do is wait and hope by the name of the Allspark that possibility does come true. Anyway, that'll be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching this, and once again, special thanks to my Patreons who helped me come up with this video. If you want to have your own suggestion of what game or anime you want me to cover, feel free to drop in and join my Patreon and become a member, and I'll be doing a poll of what you guys like to see next. But with that, let me know down in the comments if you guys played this game, what are your fond memories of it, and do you hope for a release of this game some point. Until then, Mad Kaiser, out.